Part 5. After passing through the rightmost of the 5 doors before the statues, they saw a classic graveyard sprawling before them. The place was veiled in fathomless darkness, aside from the parts lit by magical illumination. These guild members had delved into countless dungeons. There was nothing to be afraid of. However, Monga could see in the dark, but he could not see his companions. It would seem they had been teleported elsewhere. After all, if there were only one teleport destination, there would be no need for so many doors. It was a logical conclusion. Monga abandoned his vain hope. All he could do was pray they all met up again inside. However, a cold part of himself was saying, "That's impossible." Good grief, what a relief. Those devs might be shit, but even they aren't shitty enough to split up the team. You know, split them up and make them meet up again. Take Yan. So you're saying that if they ended up sending multiple people of the same roles together, we might as well forget about trying to conquer this dungeon, then? I really think those shitty devs would actually do that. I agree with you, Boku-chan. Honestly, sometimes I feel the developers are too evil. Sucks to be you, is what imagine they'd say. Ueyama-chan's bullying me. Teha. Perhaps she might be cute when she laughed in the real world, but she looked like a monster in here. Since it was only her voice which was adorable, that just made her appear even scarier. Kazeki. Repeat after me, Kazeki. Kazeki. Oh goodest. Then, Boku Kazeki, since you've gotten your energy back, let's go. Yama-chan's bullying me. They talked and laughed as they prepared themselves. There were many things to do. For instance, the frontliners had to activate long-lasting skills, or buff themselves up with magic items. Undead reactions. Forget it, they're everywhere. In any case, I'll let you guys see for yourselves. Monga, the Eternal Backliner, cast a spell, which let everyone detect undead reactions. Well, I expected as much, but to think it really was undead. Well, it kind of bothers me to go in so directly, but I guess this works too. Controlling hate is a pain, after all. Buka Chigama grumbled as she saw the red dots in her field of vision. When monsters attacked, they would target the one they wanted to hit the most. This could be expressed as a numeric value, called hate. Causing more damage, healing HP, buffing, debuffing or using taunting type skills would increase hate. When a player was hit by a monster, it would resolve the matter and that monsters hated the player would decrease. Because hate values fluctuated often during a battle, tanks had to pay close attention to monster hate values, lest the backliners take a hit. In order to manage golems or the undead, who were immune to mental manipulation, tanks had to use certain specialized hate control skills. Of course, that was no problem for Buka Chigama. Then, how should we proceed? They had been teleported into a burial chamber of some sort, with only one door. Doesn't look like there are any secret doors. Then I guess we have to go forward. Or do we? Still, we need to know what the undead outside are like. There were 4 red dots representing undead reactions on the other side of the door. If these undead were of the same level as themselves, then there would be no need to trouble the backliners to cast defensive spells, but their level was unknown, and there might be other enemies besides the undead. Nishiki Ryan warrior Takumi Kazuchi raised their weapons, while Buka Chigama the tank moved to the front, holding up 2 shields. The reason why Buka Chigama did not equip herself with weapons was because slimes like herself had poor strength, and they were not suited to dealing physical damage. In return, however, they had extremely high resistance to that same physical damage. In order to DPS as a slime, one needs to specialize in assassin-type classes which killed in one hit. It would seem she was going to test the waters, and see what the enemy was like. The proof of that was how they had not seen her preparing to use a powerful skill before moving to contact. Then, as discussed earlier, you'll be our commander, Bukabuk Uchigama. Okay, Igoka. It seems you're always trying to sound like a cute kid when there's no need to. Your voice as Kazeki is pleasant enough, so there's no need for that, right? Yama-chan. I think I'm in love. Ah, sorry. I'm not into that sort of thing. I was dumped. And instantly too. Bukabuk Uchigama emitted a mournful cry of despair. Of course, anyone could tell that it was merely acting. Still, she was a seiyuu, for games where sound was important because expressions could not change. Therefore, it sounded quite realistic. In the past, I'm not sure if it was because I said the wrong thing, but one of my female kohei actually confessed to me for real. So I hope you'll give me a break here. Ah, really? There was no trace of her prior dejection in the way Bukabuk Uchigama was asking Yamaiko. Come to think of it, nothing good came of it at all. That kuhai of mine loved to make trouble. And she kept arguing with my little sister. What a headache. And so your kuhai's words depress you when you recall them now. Do you think so, Takumi Kazuchi-san? Ah, even if it was nothing much at that point in time, after several years, you'd want to get rid of them. Ah, why did I do something like that? It's like your own black history. Manga merely thought. Since he had not had any memories like those at that time. These should have been mistakes of one's youth. However, he was a proper adult now, and he was certain that he would never make such a mistake. Well, it would be good if it was like that. For all you know, that troublesome kuhai might have gotten married, and became a wife and mother. The men looked toward the pink slime. Let's not talk about marriage, Yama-chan. You see, I am everyone's idol Chigama-san, so all talk of lovers and weddings are forbidden. What was she worried about? What Bukabuk Uchigama said made him want to tease her. Good thing Peronchino-san isn't here, Manga thought. If he was, he would definitely make a big deal out of it. Well, that's enough girl talk for now, no? We ought to move on. It would be bad if we were the last to arrive at our destination. Okay then, we'll go with the standard lineup. Nishiki-san, are there any traps? Definitely not. Then, shall we? Buff us all up, please. Extended buffs for me. Take it away, Manga-san. Manga began buffing up the group, and Yamaiko followed suit from beside him. If the enemy had been here, who knew how much hate they would have gained? Ah, honestly, it's quite surprising how many spells you know. Even with cash items you can only get up to 400. It would be nice to get levels in something which gives an ability similar to Dark Wisdom. A magic caster's strength is measured by the number of spells he knows, after all. Really? I feel firepower should be the main consideration, right? Personally, I'm quite envious of your attack power, Albert-san. I've been thinking about it recently, but if damage is all you want, wouldn't that be more easily done by the frontliners? Magic casters ought to know utility spells. However, magic casters are limited by MP, so they've got higher DPS than frontliners as long as their MP holds out, no? Seems firepower really is more important. Oh, I'm done buffing over here. Okay then, it's my turn. First, open the door and let the undead in. We'll be in combat once they come in through the door, okay? After receiving acknowledgement from the others, Bukabuk Uchigama waddled stickily over to the front and opened the door. She immediately fell back. Although it would be good to bottleneck the enemy at the door, the chance of things cocking up would be lessened if they have more space to fight. 4 undead surged in. There was no sign of other monsters. Their skin was the color of rotted wood, covered in livor mortis, over which they were nominally wearing some rags. Their hands were twisted into strange shapes, like a ball covered in dagger-like spikes. Their jaws hung open, revealing long, tusk-like teeth that grew up and out. Monga saw the names of the enemy in his field of vision, and judging by the color of those names, they were lower level than him. Still, this was an unexplored dungeon, so it paid to be cautious. He could not rule out the fact that they might be variant monsters. Even if they looked the same on the outside, if the names included the name of the region, they would probably be somewhat higher in level than other monsters of their type. There were players who were either careless or arrogant, and fought unknown monsters without collecting information about them. In the end, not a single one of them got away without learning a painful lesson. The others should have seen the names as well, so it was likely that all they could infer from the color of the names was the monster's relative level. Discern enemy. This spell was not as useful as the lore skills of the sage-type classes, but Monga had a certain degree of insight when it came to the undead. Another window popped up, and among the information there was the monster's level. Level 83. HMPH. If that's all, we won't need to trouble the two of you. Aura. Nishiki Enrai and warrior Takumi Kazuchi launched their attacks at the four undead. Given that they were merely level 83 monsters, there was no need to use their more powerful skills, which had limited uses per day. They could finish this battle easily with skills that refreshed after a short rest. It seems you didn't take much damage, so what should we do, Kazeki? Well, if that's all, it'll regen by itself, so let's push on, answered Bukabuka Uchigama, who had skillfully controlled the group's hate and taken all the attacks aimed at the others upon herself. The reply was directed at Yamaiko. Meanwhile, Nishiki Enrai was picking up the golden data crystals that had dropped after wiping out the undead. So, it's over. Then, let's advance, Monga-san. Naturally, Monga knew what Bukabuka Uchigama was getting at. Understood, he replied, and as he said that he cast his spells. Extend magic, bless of Titania. Extend magic, lead of Yatagarasu. A tiny fairy appeared in front of them. She wore a crown, yet was only the height of a little finger. She flapped her butterfly wings, enveloping her in a sphere of light, and floated at the head of the group. The next spell created a three-legged crow. Unlike normal crows, it exuded a stern majesty. It flapped its wings, and flew to the head of the formation as well, beside the little glowing ball. The Yatagarasu guided players along the shortest path to the heart of the dungeon, while the fairy queen beside him would take them along the least dangerous path. They would decide which to follow depending on the resource expenditures, traps and monsters encountered along the way. However, neither of these spells indicated hidden routes. In addition, there were magical traps which were designed to confuse spells like these, so they had to stay on guard. To think you actually knew 2 9th-tier divinations. I'm pretty envious of your dark wisdom. Well, I'm a specialized necromancer. I'd be nothing more than a burden if I couldn't even do that much. I think your dream build is actually quite practical. Is that so? Monga chuckled. It could not be helped, after all one of his friends had praised him. Then, lead on, Nishiki-san. Roger that, commanded Ono. Behind their guides, the party proceeded in the order of Nishiki Enrai, warrior Takumi Kazuchi, Bukabuka Uchigama, Monga, Albert and finally Yamaiko. If this was not the first time they had seen this dungeon, they could probably go straight to the heart of the dungeon without further ado. However, they knew nothing of this place, so they had to keep an eye out for traps as they moved. Monga most cherished the times when they chatted with each other as they moved along, one eye on their surroundings. Although people derived enjoyment from the games in different ways, Monga was happiest when talking with the others. For all he knew, it was because he only talked about business at work, and thus he thirsted after genuine conversation. Monga aimlessly contemplated that possibility. Still, this does seem like your average tomb-type dungeon. Nothing really stands out. Could there be some gimmick here? Or some kind of evil trap? Wouldn't some unfair battlefield that tests our preparation be par for the course? Maybe there's nothing devious besides the splitting up at the beginning of the dungeon. The others shook their heads as they heard Nishiki Enrai speak. No, there'll definitely be something. The developers would definitely pull something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if these elemental dungeons pushed people towards making optimized parties. Indeed, I think the developers would be capable of that. They're the shitty devs, after all. Why would they let you clear a dungeon you'd never seen before? Nishiki-san, you're underestimating the Yggdrasil devs. Or could it be, I say, Monga-san? Buka Uchigama turned what was probably her face toward Monga. Sorry about this, but could you contact my little brother with a message? I need to double-check the situation with him. Got it. With no reason to refuse, Monga cast the message spell and sent it to Peroncino. After a brief ringtone, about 10 seconds worth, the other side picked up. Yo, free to talk. Yup. Well, we've finished fighting, so it should be all right. How are you over there? We're moving through a tomb now. As I thought, those shitty devs. Wow, what happened? We were teleported to some kind of lava land. Fire-type monsters have been attacking us. And something ambushed us from the magma. It really did a number on us. Really? He passed on what Peroncino was saying through the message to his comrades about being teleported to a magma-rich area. Their responses were along the lines of, as expected. Do you think we could swap party members with teleportation magic? Well, I think it's worth a try, but do you think the devs would be that nice? Since we're on different floors, we might not be able to teleport at all. Otherwise, why would they put those doors at the entrance? In the worst-case scenario, we might have been warped into another dimension through those teleport traps. Monga switched the message spell back. Then how are you guys over there? Can you break through? Right now, we should be able to handle it. Man, if you thought undead would be around because it was a tomb and selected fire-type gear to deal with them, you'd be screwed. All you'd be able to do is run and hide. They really are pieces of shit, those devs. Got it. Good luck, guys. You too. Monga then tried contacting the other parties. After that, he learned that the dungeon they had invaded was one with multiple floors. With 5 different zones or floors: a glacier, a volcanic region, an underground lake, a forest and the tomb which Monga and the others were presently in. In addition, the monsters in each floor were different, and it seemed the undead were only present in the tomb. Wow, as expected of our new guildmaster. Not bringing specialized gear was the right choice. If they had simply loaded themselves with fire and holy elemental equipment in order to take on the undead expected from this place, quite a few teams would have had a hard time. However, because this was the first time they were raiding an unexplored dungeon, they had brought along all sorts of gear, in accordance to the differing information they had collected. In other words, they had the ability to adapt their loadouts in response to changing situations, and thus they had a fighting chance to make it deeper into the dungeon. Totally different from the previous leader. Well done. Monga furrowed his brows in response to Albert's exclamation. For once, not having facial expressions in Yggdrasil was a great help. However, the shitty devs are really shitty. I won't forget to add shitty in front of the developers whenever I speak of them. Did you only just realize that now? Like the Longinus, what the hell is up with that? And then there were those events that were impossible to clear. Just as everyone was passionately venting their spleens at the Yggdrasil developers, Monga sent a message to Albert, who had wandered off to the side. "What's the matter, Monga-san? Something wrong?" "No, it's not like that. I don't think I've noticed any mistakes so far." "Well, I just wanted to talk to you in private, and to be frank, I've been thinking about this for a while." "Albert-san, do you really hate Tudge-san that much?" He could have just kept putting it off. Monga did not want to tread on a landmine, after all. However, this hidden bomb might explode in the future. If that were the case, he had to know if there was anything which might cause the guild to disband. Besides, if it did go off now, at least the damage would be limited. As though mocking Monga's resolve, Albert remained silent. And then, just as Monga was about to give up, there was a quiet answer. "I dislike him. Though I know it's just pointless jealousy." "Is that so? Monga-san, I'm really sorry for saying this, but aren't you a born loser like me, Monga-san? No matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to lead a comfortable life." "Well, I didn't try that hard to begin with anyway, so I think I'm getting what I deserve. Besides, it beats being bored. I get paid, after all, and I don't mind sinking my money into Yggdrasil." "Well, I guess that's true. Maybe you're a half-loser then. Personally, I only made it through elementary school. I think it was the same for you, am I right, Monga-san?" Albert seemed to have brought it up in the past, according to Monga's recollections. Indeed, his attitude towards Albert had changed since then. At first he thought it was pity, but now it would seem he was feeling a sort of kinship to him instead. That's true. However, being able to find a job with elementary school education isn't bad, right? If they didn't teach you the bare minimum in elementary school, you couldn't even become a subordinate to the born winners, so they made elementary school easy. Honestly, it's ridiculous how you end up at one of two extremes in this world from birth. It's insane how unfair this world is. You can climb the ranks if you work hard. Don't make me laugh. Compared to Albert's cloying, sludgy resentment for society, his dislike for Touch Me was laughable at best. Monga marveled at Albert's ability to hate. "Albert-san, my parents died pretty horribly. Working in such a dangerous place. They couldn't even find their bones, you know. And the compensation they paid to their employees was miserable. That's why they didn't stop the production lines. After all, stopping him would incur huge losses. Losers like us. They use us up and throw us away." Monga suddenly recalled his own mother. "That's how it was, huh? That's what happened to your parents, Albert-san. My mother worked herself to death. When I woke up in the morning I saw her collapsed in the kitchen. Even lashed with fatigue, she pushed herself to make my favorite dish. If only she hadn't worried about it and just taken a rest instead. She might still be around now. When I found her, her body was already ice cold. At least, that's how I remember it. My memory's a bit hazy on that count." After a brief silence, he was answered by a voice which sounded like it had been forced out. "I'm sorry for bringing up such an unpleasant topic. Don't worry about it, I barely remember it myself. Still, I apologize for it. All in all, I personally can't stand the winners. Although it's not like Touch-san did anything wrong. I understand. However, how should I say this? What happens out there has nothing to do with what happens here. Look, I'm enjoying myself too, right? So, how shall I say this? It would be good if you could enjoy yourself too, Albert-san. If I'm not wrong, it's not like you don't want to mix with the others, right? So, how shall I put it? It's just like you said. I'm sorry for causing you all this trouble, Monga-san. I'll do my best not to throw tantrums from now on. Then I'll leave that to you. We should probably wrap this up around now. Got it? Although, the thing about this game is... Speaking of which, Chigama-san, shouldn't I make those undead adjutants around now? You should save the skills which cost experience until the end, so either a Death Grandpa or a Death Grandma should be fine, right? Obviously, the monsters were not actually called Death Grandpa or Grandma. They were merely nicknames for the monsters known as the Death Emperor and the Death Empress. That's true. So, Grandpa or Grandma. Since our vanguards are happily cleaving through the enemy, Grandpa would be better, right? Well, they do look pretty motivated, as they loudly taunted their opponents as mooks, small fry and the like. Nishiki Enrai and warrior Takumi Kazuchi laid into the undead with powerful blows. The reason that they could attack so unreservedly was most likely due to Bukabuka Uchigama's masterful hate management. After all, we still have resources. Yama-chan. As she waited for the right moment to use a skill while the undead mauled her, Bukabuka Uchigama called out to Yamaiko, who stood behind him with a healing wand. Yes, Chigama-san. It's Kazeki. That again? Then, what's the matter, Kazeki? How's your MP? How well can you heal everyone? It's fine. Actually, I've been healing with a wand since just now. Even wands imbued with high-tier spells would only heal about half as much as Yamaiko could if she personally cast a healing spell. Still, that was adequate for the task at hand, which was a sign of how well the three frontliners had played their roles. I see then. Could you not summon your switch attacker right now, Manga-san? Got it. Then, I'll await your instructions. That's not necessary. I'll leave that to your own discretion, Manga-san. I trust you. I'll do my best, but let me know if I mess up. Of course. Though I feel your skills are pretty good, so it should be fine, Manga-san. If you train yourself, you can get even better. Oops. Hate control. She must have used a skill that built hate. The undead, who had been wavering a little, turned to assault Bukabuka Uchigama again. She was immune to the negative status effects that undead could inflict, like poison or paralysis. In other words, she was the perfect tank. Of course, Manga could not keep staring at her. He cast a 10th tier spell, which was naturally targeted on Bukabuka Uchigama. Ultimate Disturb. Technically, there was no need to speak when casting spells, but one's colleagues would not know what was going on if nothing was said. Therefore, magic casters announce their spell names as a sort of courtesy. Thank you and now. And because he observed that courtesy, Bukabuka Uchigama could spring into action right away. Thanks to this spell, Bukabuka Uchigama's magic resistance rapidly increased, and the hate which should have been allotted to Manga instead went to her. She was a very skilled player. Her swift and accurate judgments, born of long experience with the game, placed her firmly in the top class of Yggdrasil's players. In particular, she was skilled at hate management, which was a difficult task since hate was a hidden value. There was virtually no way to know how much hate in any given action produced without personal experience. Being able to do such a thing in the data-heavy Yggdrasil was a feat that required long hours of battles and practice. In a sense, Manga admired Bukabuka Uchigama. Well, if there was a way to cast this on the enemy, the caster types would be useless, Albert muttered as he used a wand to cast spells. Ultimate Disturb was a spell which greatly increases an ally's magic resistance, at the price of wrecking their ability to cast spells. It was plainly obvious that one could neuter an enemy mage if the spell could be cast on them. Well, I doubt you could ever pull that trick off, Yamaiko replied as she cast a healing spell from her wand. In contrast, Bukabuka Uchigama chimed in with approval. You shouldn't say that, Yama-chan. People discover new things because of folks like Albert-san who want to find them. Sometimes they might even find a loophole, but that's expected of those shitty devs. And so, the battle with the undead ended with the sense that it was an easy fight. If the shitty devs knew the meaning of balance, they'd probably make the boss here very strong. No, if you're going by that, the boss here would be very weak. Why would the developers know about balance? It's been amply demonstrated in the past, right? As they laughed and agreed, the group followed their magically created guides once more. After several easy battles, as they moved through the tomb. Oops, hang on. The group ground to a halt from Nishiki and Rei's sudden warning. It's a teleport trap. Disarm difficulty looks to be red. A red disarm rating meant that the chances of successfully disarming the trap were very low. The most common methods of disarming traps were through the use of a skill to temporarily raise one's success rate, using a magic item, or by casting a trap disarming spell. Then, I guess it's my turn. However, this team had a method apart from those. It was a brute force method that was also known as the Warrior's Disarm, or a Summon Disarm. Monga created a low-tier undead being a skeleton. Underneath slave sight. He cast his spell on the skeleton. A small window appeared in the corner of Monga's field of vision, allowing him to see through the skeleton's eye sockets. Monga then ordered it in the direction Nishiki Enrai was pointing at. They advanced, and then the skeleton suddenly vanished. He enlarged the small window. They had been teleported to a large burial chamber, and he could see the imposing figure of a huge monster. The monster's name and level did not appear because he was looking through the eyes of the skeleton, but Monga was already familiar with the stats of that big monster. Well, that skeleton traveled quite a distance. That's a level 95 undead creature, a greater graveyard, I think. It died. With a swipe of a massive arm, the window turned black and the spell terminated. 20 seconds have passed. The teleport trap stopped operating. Which means it's inactive for now. Wait a little longer. A minute later, Nishiki Enrai received a notification of the trap reactivating. Then, let's try it again. Monga created another skeleton, and sent it into the trap with the same spell as before. The teleport destination was the same burial chamber from earlier, guarded by the same monster. Same place. Can we conclude that the trap only goes to one location? Monga asked Bukabuka Chigama as the screen blacked out again. Of course, she replied. Monga and the others, who strongly doubted that there was a proper route through the teleport trap, hurriedly ran through the trap while it was inactive. If we get a new member in the guild, I hope they're good at trap disarming. After all, our rogue-type members are more focused on combat. That's true. However, I don't think we should be too picky. I think it'll be fine as long as they're heteromorphs. I don't want us to be like other guilds with trial periods that are several weeks long, all sorts of entry requirements and so on. After all, Punito-san said so himself, games are meant to be enjoyed. You've got a point, Monga-san, and I agree with it. I guess it's just us being selfish in wanting a proper thief. No, you're Maiko-san. I was just thinking that it would be good if we had someone like that. It's not like we won't let someone in who isn't a thief. Ah, is that so? My apologies, Takumi Kazuchi-san. It's fine, don't worry about it. I said something weird myself. Well, we beat the trap, though we had to spend some resources on it. If anything happens, we can hire NPC mercenaries. Enough chit-chat, the enemy's coming. Stay alert until we make contact. In accordance with Bukabuka Chigama's directions, Monga steeled himself for combat. Carelessness was dangerous as long as one did not know about the enemy. Just as a murky, monstrous silhouette appeared in the corner of their eyes, Monger and Albert simultaneously cast area of effect attack spells from their wands.